We
This whole
are
episode is
live.
haunted.
Okay.
Spooky.
Hello, and welcome to the Literary Roadhouse Book Club. Today we're discussing Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. I'm Anais. And I'm joined today by Literary Roadhouse regulars Maya Good and Gerald Hornsby. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Based on just what we have all been saying in Slack, this is going to be a very lively discussion, even though I think it's going to be just me defending it. So let's start with
Before I get started, I need to apologize,
You're going to apologize?
everyone, for making because we wouldn't have read this if it was my fault. And so I want to fall on my sword and say I'm really sorry for making you guys read Lincoln and Bardo. I will keep my suggestions to myself.
Yeah,
And I'll follow up by saying you're welcome. You're welcome that we suggested this book. Amazing is too strong, but this meaty-ish. Look, we'll get into the discussion.
this is going to be a long podcast.
Okay, overall impression.
Feel free to use his exasperated tone as a sound clip.
Yeah, I will. Let's start with Gerald's exasperated tone.
Hello.
Your overall impression.
Okay. First up, I like George Saunders. I like his. Stop giggling, woman. I like his short stuff. They're challenging. They're different. They're very bold. Overall impressions. Started off well and went downhill. That's my overall impression.
Oh, George. How I love you. Let me count the ways, but not this time.
Yeah.
I love George Saunders as well. Notice how we're starting with the disclaimers first. I love you, George Saunders. I love him very, very much. I love his experimental short stories. I love how he just jumps in, comes at topics from, the left field. But, when you're experimental, like in science, some of your experiments fail. And the trick is to know when your experiment is working and when it's failing. And I feel like he fails. I feel like some of the things he tries to do are genius, and they would have been genius in a short story, but for 360 some odd pages is a bit much.
Okay. So I'm probably the most positive person today in terms of this story. Not that I don't have any criticisms. And I think, Maya, what you just said about that the idea is great and being dragged out over 300 pages may be part of the issue. Yeah, I think it probably is longer than it needed to be. But I still loved it. And there were still a lot of moments where I was screaming in a good way and just like loving it and totally here for what he's painting and what his ideas. And that's hard. Like being that scintillated, being that excited about what you're reading, that you're just like screaming like, I can't believe he's writing this, or this is happening right now. I don't get that with most authors, with most books that I read, and that's not nothing. Okay.
Give us an example of a part of this book that made you scream with excitement.
Yeah, I loved. Okay, sure. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, me and Gerald were totally giving you the
I didn't want to ask
puffed up expressions. We're like, really?
Like when all of a sudden this like ghostly graveyard, the angels are about to come, and they know they're going to come because it starts to smell sweet and enticing. And angels/demons, you don't even know what they are. They don't even call them angels. They're just these beings who are trying to bring them into the afterlife, and they all have these very specific manipulative tactics to try to get people to move on to the next phase after death. I just thought it was incredibly rich, very imaginative, all the different ways that first try to coerce them with seduction, then they try to just tell them you're dead, accept this. I thought I loved it. And the way that people were in denial, the way that people's fears and desires physically mutated their ghost forms. This is new. I haven't seen this anywhere else. And it's very rare that I'll come across a book or an author who describes something and I'm just like, God, that's good. And I'm just screaming right now at like just how creative it is. I thought, like I said, that's not nothing. Even if that doesn't necessarily, that's not like the meatiest part of a story, even if that's a little bit like, it feels too shallow to call it window dressing, but still it just pulls you in. It just creates this world that's very lively, very detailed. Yeah, I like that. I like
See, I didn't have that experience at all. And I think if I would have had that experience, I would have liked it a lot more. I actually did not get pulled into the story until probably the last third of the book. The entire first 2/3 of the book, I was just struggling to keep reading. And there was no point that really pulled me in. And I could logically look at things and say, yes, this is a genius expression. Like that scene you were talking about. I was watching that and it kind of reminded me of Christmas something. And I thought it was really vividly described and everything, but I was still struggling. And I will say, why did I struggle so much with this story? Let's just get it out here. The form is written like a Greek chorus in a play. So the entire book is snippets and quotes with citations, one after another. And what this did was it prevented me from getting too close to any of the characters. It prevented me from really understanding who was talking at most points in the story. And it was very choppy for me. So in this point of what's really happening kind of feeling, which prevented me from ever actually getting into the story. I actually like the concept of writing in like a Greek chorus. I think that is really interesting, especially looking at the historical, what Greek choruses were made for. And then this is what's happening in this graveyard. And conceptually, it makes like amazing sense. And this is something that I was talking to someone earlier. I was like, you know what? This book fails, but I can see a young writer reading this, being inspired and writing like the next great American novel. Like I can see that happening down the line. This was like waiting for Godot for 400 pages. This didn't work long form because it was so choppy. It never actually allowed me to get pulled in. That said, the descriptions, very novel descriptions, but I was not able to emotionally get involved enough to really enjoy them. Some of the concepts, like you were saying, as far as, how what's keeping them there mutates their form was really interesting. And then occasionally you get something out of left field that just pissed me off. Raped mulatto, like, I wanted to slap Saunders just for that phrase. Like he literally put that in one of his characters' mouth. Now, I get, the time period and whatnot. And I had no problem with the character itself because that is a real character. I had no problem with the other character's response to that character. But the way he actually described her is a stereotype that literally pissed me off. So I had a lot of issues.
Let's stick to the framing device and structure and then get into characters, just because I think you're right that the framing device.
It just came out. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We'll get to characters. So the framing device. Really? Yeah. But there was this. So you talked about the Greek chorus, the snippets of history. What I actually looked up a lot of those citations, and a lot of them were real. Most of them, the majority of them, or maybe all of them, and some I just couldn't find because some of them were letters from the period. So it's like so well researched, and I get what you're saying. That so okay. Everything that happens at the graveyard, everything that happens with the ghosts is the Greek chorus structure. And everything that happens in the White House with the living people is historical references that he actually looked up. These are real historical citations. And what I liked about that is the way that it sort of tethers it to our own history, which makes it it makes it feel more relevant. And the other part was the way that they would describe the same thing differently. All the different ways to describe the party, whether or not there was a full moon. Some people said there was no moon, there was a half moon. The way the sky was red, the sky was gray the night that Willie died. And I thought that was interesting because that was echoed. Now I'm getting a little into theme, but that was echoed in the graveyard as well, with the way that everyone interpreted what the afterlife is, what is waiting for them, what they're avoiding, why they're here, what this graveyard is completely differently. And the way that everyone's looking at the same thing and has a different theory about what it is. And in a very meta way, that's what this book is doing. This book has its own sort of theory about what the afterlife is or what purgatory is, which I thought was really fascinating. And then the way that you see that in actual historical quotes from the night that Willie died, and everyone's saying something different. Genius.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
That's what pisses me off, because this book is genius, like in so many ways. And the fact that I hated reading it makes me mad.
And the framing device is part of the problem. I hate that the names came after the speech. So I'm like, I don't even know who's talking right now. Just put it in the beginning like a play. Like just,
Yeah, if it had been written in a play format, actually, I did have this thought. And Annie, this is not a joke. I've read a lot of plays. And plays typically are about 120 pages long. They have settings at the beginning of each act or whatever. And the person who's speaking is stated ahead of time. I actually think this would have worked really well as a play. If this had been a play, I would have loved it. I really thought it was one of the top 10 plays of all time if this was written in play format. And honestly, I think it should be. I think someone should come along and adapt this to play, because I think it would be much better as a play.
Cheryl, do you have anything to add about the framing device?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not trying to be.
Is this the episode where the old folks complain?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be cute, but yeah, it was because I just, my overall thing was just very short, but yeah, it's very clever. It's very clever. It's interesting. It's an experiment. It's challenging to read, and 10,000 words, 15,000 words. I think, yeah, okay, that's different, and I enjoy this, and the craft, the technical writing is blemish free. It's fine. But it just goes on and on and on, and excuse me. Yeah, I like the fact that he quotes, and I sort of just assume, I didn't look anything up because I couldn't be bothered. I like the fact that he used real references from the time. I just assumed they were all real, and showing the different reports of what actually happened, so that it's unreliable narrators, and you got the same thing happening in the graveyard. But the thing that makes it clever is the thing that drives you mad, because you can't, because choppy is as Maya said, is one way of describing it, but it's just I just got so tired, and I read it all, and I wish I hadn't, and I just because I was determined to finish it. It's finishing. I did a cross country run once. I was stone last. They were taking the finish line apart. I was, but I kept going, and it's the same thing with this. I just think, oh, why am I doing this? So basically, so yeah, so the framing device, very clever, very very innovative, very different. And yeah, after about page 50, I thought I've had enough of this. There you go.
Yeah, we kept putting off this episode because this book was cursed, and even though we kept putting it off for 2 months, it took me the full 2 months to read this book, because it was so choppy and it was so miserable, and I had to keep putting it down. I had to reread sections because I wasn't sure what was happening. I mean, the most offensive example of that is when they first are describing the children that choose to stay and what happens to them. And the gay ghost is talking, and at first I thought he was describing child rape, what he was describing. But for several pages of the story, when I'm uncertain of the environment and what's going on, that was how it was being, that's how it was coming off to me. And it wasn't the case at all, and it completely confused me. So, like he said, I read the whole thing. unlike him, I'm actually glad I finished reading it, because I know that eventually a young writer is going to read this book and be inspired, and something really amazing is going to come down as a descendant of this novel. I see this novel as like a signpost of a new way of writing novels, but I don't think it hits the mark because it touches on something that literary fiction sometimes struggles with, but also modern art struggles with this as well. And it's that line between ability. So you are creating a piece of artwork. There's no doubt this is a piece of artwork. You know, I may be mad at the Man Booker Prize, but I can't say that I entirely don't understand. Okay, so this is a piece of artwork, but it is very difficult to read, to understand, and to enjoy. Now, not all art needs to be enjoyed. I am a huge proponent of a lot of visual artists that you look at it and it makes your stomach crawl and you have really strong emotions around art. But my strong emotions around this book have nothing to do with what's actually happening in the book. And that to me is the difference between, you know, a book that is art, that is creating an emotion that's maybe not joy, but is still like a valuable emotion, and a book that's not getting the mark. Because all of my emotions around this book have to do with the artist, not the characters.
And I do wonder whether some of the more sort of visceral and actually unpleasant parts of the book were just thrown in there as this will get them talking, this will shock them out of it. I don't feel that they were necessary. I don't feel that they added anything. And I did feel like he was, oh, you know, we're being experimental, we're doing this, we're doing that, and here's a bit of distasteful dialogue. You're
talking about the massive boner.
Yeah.
Massive boners, the young couple that curse all the time, and
oh yeah,
and died in a ditch. I actually like them.
I like them. Yeah.
The interesting collision between the slave ghosts and the white ghosts. I thought that could have gone to some really interesting places and gone a lot deeper than it did. Instead, I felt like it relied on a lot of stereotypes, and because of the stereotypes, that's what made it offensive, not necessarily the idea or the concept, but the stereotyping of them is what made it offensive for me.
Would you say, do you think that all of the slave narratives were stereotyped, or are you zeroing in on the raped mulatto character? And a little bit
mulatto, for one, the guy that talks, the Uncle Tom that talks above his status and then gets his comeuppance after death when he realizes, you know, the family he loved is never going to come look for him. Such a stereotype, such a stereotype. I was like, really? You couldn't do more? You've got an entire graveyard outside this gate full of slave ghosts. They break into the white ghosts. They go to this mausoleum where President Lincoln's child is dead, and that's what you come up with? That's just lazy to me.
Yeah. Well, the Uncle Tom one, it's funny. That wasn't the one that stayed with me was the guy who fell ill on the road and they just let him die there where he fell. That was a different guy though. He was different.
That was a different guy, and that one didn't feel like a stereotype. That one actually felt interesting to me.
Yeah, that
one actually was done well. But the dynamic, I felt like it could have gone to some really good and fascinating places.
Yeah, but then I understand what you're saying, especially when you have a book this big that starts repeating itself. So you guys said it felt like a chore to get through. The first 70% went by quickly for me, and then the last 30% became a slog because I felt like we all know what's going to happen next, and it's repeating itself a bunch right now. Like how many?
Whereas the last third was the part that pulled me in, and the first 2/3 is the part that was molasses.
It felt quick for me for some reason, but I mean,
I will say that the last third felt faster because I finally was starting to get a handle on who was talking. It literally took me that long.
I would always skip ahead, which was annoying. I would skip ahead to be like, who's reading? Okay, and then I go back and that was very annoying.
Yeah, it literally took 2/3 of the novel for me to actually just be able to read, and not every single time it jogged go, who's talking, who's talking.
Yeah. But let's continue talking about the characters then. So we just talked a little bit about the slave characters. We're talking about their different mutations. There's the ghost with a giant boner because he died before he could bone his wife. And then there was a bunch of minor characters.
I love that, actually. I love that.
It's hilarious.
I mean, he just wants to feel everything. So he has many arms and eyeballs and ears.
Yeah. Or there's the guy who throughout his entire life had all the different properties. He was very wealthy, all the gardens, and he was constantly running from property to property, taking care of them. And when he dies, he's horizontal. He floats, and he's like a compass pointing at whatever in the direction of whatever property he's fretting about now. Like, that's great. The hunter who has to hug every single animal he's ever killed. Yeah.
That's good, yeah.
I really like the ghost mutations and the way how when they all came together, when they all possessed, because they possessed people, when they all possessed Abraham Lincoln at the same time, and they all mutated. Yeah, but they all start learning about each other, and they stop thinking about only themselves, and they start understanding each other's pain. And for the first time, they're not just worried about what they fear or what they desire most. And that's when they all start to look normal. That's when the boner goes away, right? Yeah, that's when Bevins only has two eyes. That was beautiful. See?
I would say my favorite part of the story was when the Reverend describes going to the afterlife and what he saw there, and then coming back in fear. I thought that was really powerful and very well done. It was also probably one of the longer sections, which may have no small part in why I enjoyed it so much. At that moment was the beginning of where I actually started to have emotions around the story and get pulled in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And also I got the sense that that's not actually the afterlife everyone's going to see. That's how he's seeing it because of his beliefs. And I like that a lot. That theme of everyone's interpreting the same thing differently kept coming up, and I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's I mean, some of the characters were what has he been smoking? Some of the characters were very entertaining, very, very cleverly done. Because even the most ridiculous characters were somehow realistic too, which is kind of strange. And I can't think of any examples, but yeah. So there's bits of this which are really clever, and you think afterwards, I think, yeah, that was a clever bit, and that was clever how he did that. But as a novel, I don't think it works. Oh, okay. Sorry, we're not at that stage yet.
How did you feel about Willie? I felt like I never really got a sense of him as a character.
He was like a foil
I mean, he's a child. He's innocent. He got sick. He loves his dad. That's about as much as I got.
Yeah. He's just an object, isn't he? He's not really a character.
Yeah,
he's an object to save for the other characters, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I thought maybe I was missing something.
No, he's the brave one who finally gets most of them to accept that they're dead. But yeah, I feel like he was a foil for everyone else, because really what we're looking at is, when is Holman, boner dude? When is Bevins, the guy with many eyes and many hands? So every time I think of Bevins, I think of the Goodreads review where it's like 200 words of, I love this. This was great. Oh my God. And then at the end, why does Bevins have so many eyes? It's my favorite review.
Yeah, I haven't read any of the Goodreads reviews. So I'm going to have fun going through them after this.
Yeah.
I refuse to want to be influenced. But I understand that this book was very polarizing, that no one feels ambivalent about this book, that everyone either hates it or adores it. And I think that is actually a mark of good literary fiction. I don't think literary fiction should be books that everyone loves. And so...
yeah, it's the same with any art, isn't it? Any art which gets people talking and discussing is great art. So...
And I do think that down the line, I may read this totally differently. I do think this is one of those books that, there are some books you read them at a certain age and it doesn't click, and then you read it at a different age and it clicks.
Yeah.
Wait.
I feel like this might be one of those books.
You're going to read it again?
No, but I'm thinking maybe if I was 75 when I was reading it, it might be better.
Well, that's someone who's nearly 60. No.
But Gerald, you're not really nearly 60. You're just nearly 60 as a number. Deep down inside, you're just one of us.
Hang on, I'll be just back in a second.
You haven't really aged.
But it's funny that you were just saying it's polarizing. That's something Saunders very aware of. After I finished the book, I listened to an interview with him where he says he writes more or less knowing that out of a group of like 5 people or 5 or 6 people, 2 of them are already on his wavelength and will love it. 2 of them he's never going to get. They're never going to understand what he's trying to do. Or they do understand it, they just don't like it. They don't like it. And then his goal is the remaining 2 or 3 people to convince them to see this, to think about this, even if they don't love it, just to see if they can get something from it, maybe like some parts of it.
Yeah. Well, I definitely fall into that portion of, I understand what he's doing, and I just don't like it. I've read a lot of George Saunders short stories by now. Mm-hmm. The one thing that his short stories have in common is at no point in the short story do I feel like it's not a cohesive piece.
Mm-hmm.
At no point in his short stories do I feel like admitted or there's something that's missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that the novel stands up to that level. Now, is that an unfair line? And this may actually be a fair question, because as Stephen King says, the art of the short story is the pinnacle of good writing. The best short story is always going to be better than the best novel. That is his, and I'm inclined to agree with him. Fair to look at a novel and say it doesn't stand up of tightness that you write your short stories.
Mm-hmm.
Write a short story as tight as he writes his short. I don't think you can write a novel as tightly as he writes his short stories.
Mm-hmm.
No,
and so is it just bound to disappoint?
And I think if you tried to do that, and if you had a novel that was written like a short story, you'd be exhausted by.
Then you're Donna Tartt. You're writing a novel every 10 years.
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, there has the long.
Does somebody not like Donna Tartt?
But the long form allows you more space to explore different ideas and different characters and shows a sort of longer.
It also gives you more room to shoot yourself in the foot, more strings to try to tie up.
Well, yeah, if
a lot more links.
I think if like this book, if you've got something that doesn't appeal to a certain reader, then making it longer just makes it far, far worse. So
yeah,
if this was a short story, I'd go, oh, that's clever. Yeah, I didn't like it much. I didn't enjoy it as a story, but it was very clever and interesting, and you could have discussion around that. But when it's 300 odd pages long, you just go, well, be done already.
Am I glad that I read it? Yes, I am. I feel like this is a line in the sand of literary fiction that is going to lead in a new and interesting direction for future authors. And I don't take that lightly. I will say there are very few novels that I've ever DNF'd.
Mm-hmm.
Either finish the book or I put it on the shelf and I come back to it later. If I had not been reading this for the book club, I would have DNF'd this. I would not have finished it. I would have read probably the first 30%, 25%, and then just said, forget it, I'm done.
And if you just read 30% of it, can you get any more out of the other 70% than what you've already got out of 30%?
I'd say, right around 20%. I had a really good grasp of what he was doing conceptually, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought it wasn't working. I knew somewhere down the line, Willie was going to cross into the light and bring some ghosts with him. And I knew that I hated it. So, yeah, my review wouldn't have changed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it goes back to the question, like, is it okay to review books that you DNF, because the whole idea is if you DNF a book, you can't fully understand the book, and therefore the review is invalid. In this case, I actually think I had a really good grasp of the book, right around 25 to 30%.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think that's why the last 30
telegraphs itself really well.
The last 30. Yeah, the only thing is there are some things after the first 30% that I think were interesting, like the Reverends in the Afterlife section. And also, I don't really know. So, okay, Gerald earlier was saying that some things felt like they were put in there just to continue experimenting or shock. So the boner guy didn't bother me. I thought that was funny. But one thing that did, I was like, when I first saw it, I thought it was cool, but then I didn't really get what it was doing, was that the carapace, the thing that kept trying to tie down Willie the longer he stayed in the graveyard, was made of like damned souls. I'm like, why? That I didn't fully, the little voices talking, they were unrepentant. They weren't damned. They were unrepentant. Those people who were like, why should we feel bad for the sins that we did? Because most of them were deterministic. They were like, we were born in the situation we were born in, taught the things that we were taught, given the character that we were given, and life unfurled in the way that it was going to unfurl. Therefore, we have no guilt for all the things that we did that were horrible. So they were unrepentant people. So that was interesting. But why is their role then to tie down Willie?
Well, what is their role in society? Like, you have people in society that think whatever I do doesn't really matter morally because I do it because it's how I was born or how I was raised or how I was brought up.
Yeah.
I can see the metaphor there.
Yeah.
Turning into a weed within society and bringing down innocence.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
I liked though was that these ghosts felt human and almost indistinguishable from a living person because of the way that they were obsessed with their fears and desires. I feel like there was a point there about the obsession with fears and desires and how it makes the single-minded and mutated. That was interesting. And there's a speech that the Reverend gives in Kindle, it's 37% in, that the Reverend is giving to all the other ghosts, that I'm like, you could word for word do this in a church full of living people. You don't have to change a single word and it applies. And I wanted to read it because I feel like this is really the point of the novel to me. When I'm thinking about what is Saunders trying to say, was this. It was, we are here by grace, the Reverend said, our ability to abide far from assured. Therefore, we must conserve our strength, restricting our activities to only those which directly serve our central purpose. We would not wish, through profligate activity, to appear ungrateful for the mysterious blessing of our continued abiding. For we are here, but for how long, and by what special dispensation is not ours to know. Like, I was just like, you could say this anywhere with people. Like, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I suppose it's then another parallel between the Bardo life and real life and living life, and he's sort of reinforcing the reality of the Bardo by drawing parallels and making these parallels in your head.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So we've touched on the framing device, characters, themes. What about just your thoughts on just this imagining of the afterlife and purgatory? Was there anything just about the way that he framed this up that you liked or irritated you?
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was because I don't believe in the afterlife. I don't think much about it, but I'm aware that people do, and so I've tried to imagine what it would be like, and I haven't got any further than thinking, what would it be like? And I don't know. So, but what he's done is in a way, brought it to life by showing us what it could be like, and it's a whole sort of society. It's a whole sort of, you can't. It's hard to describe it without using living. I was going to say weird way of living. It's obviously not living, but it's very clever what he's done, and I was entertained by that whole sort of. I was looking forward to finding out what it was, having read the blurb and a bit of the sort of introduction. Then, I was looking forward to seeing what he did with it, and that was very clever and very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a fun description of the Judeo-Christian idea of the afterlife. I think it was very much sandwiched in, you know, that philosophy for sure. For me, it felt old version of the Christmas Carol and the Ghost to Christmas Past and the Ghost to Christmas Yet to Come, and everything's like shiny and gold and vibrant, and like this description of the afterlife, the Bardo, kind of felt like that to me. It had that like really vibrance and color and kind of hit you over the head. Not a lot of nuance though. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I found it interesting.
I think it's also interesting that you say it's a Judeo-Christian afterlife, because I agree that's exactly how it reads. So then why did he call it the Bardo, which is in some schools of Buddhism, it's the intermediate state between death and rebirth. So he's taking a Buddhist term, but there's nothing Buddhist about this. It's very Judeo-Christian.
No, there's no talk of rebirth. There's the idea of, you know, going into the light, following the angels or whatever. It's not. And I actually, that is actually a little bit annoying. I think it would have been much better described as Lincoln in purgatory, because it felt like purgatory more than, I think as a Judeo-Christian example of the afterlife, I think it was really well done. I think that it would have been more interesting for me if he had conceptualized an afterlife that could be imagined in multiple faiths. I think I would have found that more interesting. Let's say the Bardo also kind of looks like other faiths' afterlives as well, but it's all the same place. I think that would have been more fascinating to me. But as it was, as far as the setting, it was just, you know, very Ghost to Christmas Past. And
yeah, but though I think it could apply to different faiths. The reason it might feel Judeo-Christian is because, again, we're seeing a Christian reverend do the afterlife bit. But you're seeing
the other ghosts as well. You're seeing the other ghosts as well.
Christians.
But they weren't. All those black ghosts, you telling me that none of those black ghosts practice anything other than Christianity?
I don't know, because it's just they're all from different times.
They're all from different places. They're all from different countries. You know, it would have been interesting to have had a ghost in there that was seeing everything a little bit different.
Yeah. So I was going to ask about motifs and symbols. Oh, you're cutting out, Maya. Are you still talking? It cut out completely.
No, I'm still talking.
Oh, there was no sound coming through, so I thought you had finished.
Well, I wasn't saying.
I'll just edit
it. Huh? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
You're back now. Yeah.
Okay.
Hello?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
Okay. It keeps moving choppy, so I don't know if you're like gonna say something or.
Yeah.
Are you typing? Well. Hello. Okay, we'll just cut this out.
Yeah. I think it's probably her internet. That's maybe there's a lot of people using it. It's not that fast.
Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
Is this better?
Kind of. You came in a little robotic, but
yeah. I think it's probably.
I wasn't saying anything that whole time. You guys were like, "What are you saying?" I'm like, "I wasn't saying anything."
When you do say it's quite choppy.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and the video moves choppy too, so I don't know where you actually are.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of like blinking in and out.
Yeah. Okay. Let's carry on.
Do you wanna repeat what you were saying and then I'll edit it, or?
I don't remember what I was saying. You'll find it in my recorder.
Okay. All right. I'll edit it and salvage what I can. Okay. So I was gonna ask about motifs and symbols, but I'm feeling like, what's our appetite like for?
I mean, this book is full of symbology. I mean, it's George Saunders. He is a genius in the art of the story. Full of symbols. It's full of motifs. You know, where do you start with something like that?
Yeah. Did you guys at any point struggle with the prose? He does a lot of technical rule breaking. There's some stream of consciousness, just like word vomits that happen. But I feel like he's really good at that. He's been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
We read some strange stuff on here, and I think we're kind of used. We accept different sort of grammatical rules here, so I don't think we care about that.
Yeah, I would say if I'd read this before we had done Literary Roadhouse, I would have had a much better understanding of what the story was.
Yeah.
I felt like the actual writing itself within each quote was amazing. Both in the idea that he found these quotes. Like, can you imagine sitting there writing a book made up of quotes from people that actually said stuff? Like, the amount of research and detail that went into that is kind of amazing. But then also, all the made up quotes were so well done that there were times I wasn't quite sure, is this a real quote or is this a fake quote, like, you know, kind of thing. And that in and of itself was genius. I loved how, you know, each character had its own voice, but also each time period had its own voice. So, like, Ghost from a specific time period kind of sounded similar. Time period. I especially loved the dialogue from the slave who is trying to speak above his station. He uses much more flowery language than his masters probably would have used. And I thought that symbolized something kind of unique. And I thought George Saunders really nailed that. You know, when it comes to, like, theme and motifs, this book is full of them. You know, like, you're talking about the way things smell to, you know, the difference, like the theme of everyone seeing everything differently. That's the most obvious. The one that really got me was when everyone was describing all the different ways that Lincoln was either handsome or ugly. I loved that. You know, so, you know, these are all things that George Saunders, A, does well, and B, really, really put it on the front stage for this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys want to add? Because I'm feeling the energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
No, I don't really have anything else to add.
No. Only bad stuff. So.
I was gonna say, yeah, I agree with a lot of motifs and symbols, but I almost feel like I finished reading this so long ago, and the thing got pushed. A lot of it has to do with, like, the way that, because it repeats itself a lot, it almost feels like ideas are, like, there's, like, memes within the book, right? Like this whole, like, the meme of, like, the sick box and never acknowledging that you're dead, and all the different ways that they put off acknowledging that they have died, even though they sort of already know. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty interesting, but
aspect of the game of telephone in this book, where one ghost will say something, it gets passed on to another ghost, and by the time it gets on down the line, it's totally different. I thought that was really cute.
Yeah. The ghosts are always
happen in the afterlife.
Yeah, and there was, like, talking over each other, and they have cliques. They have little ghost cliques, and because Bevins, Holman, and the Reverend at one point are like, we need to protect ourselves. All these other people are crazy, and they're all the same. Like, they all have the same fears, the same things. You know, it's really just fear of the ultimate death, and it's like, that's very relatable for a person.
Yeah.
Shall we do our one sentence rating/recommendations?
Yep. I haven't written anything down. I'll just make it up.
Yeah.
I would say it's classic George Saunders, experimental, challenging, full stop.
Okay.
I will say, important piece of literature, read the first 25%. If you don't like it, put it down.
Okay. I'd say you should read it. It's not that long. And if you can't, then don't do anything. It feels long towards the end for me, but at the beginning it didn't feel that long. No, I think if you're someone who already likes Saunders a lot, especially when he does weird stuff, this is jam-packed of all that weird stuff. And I think that helped me get through some of the slog. Just like, what is the next weird thing he's throwing in there? It worked for me in it, and hopefully it works for other people as well. Okay.
So I got a question. What do you guys think he's going to win the Man Booker?
No.
I hope not. No.
I don't think so.
No.
I think he'll make.
No, I don't think so either.
He might make the short list. He's on the long now, but
Yeah, I think his next.
I think they'll put him on the short list just because. Yeah.
Because he is. Yeah, I think his next book would have a chance, because it's his first novel. He doesn't know.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how it's going to turn out. So, I think he might. His next book might be a real crackerjack book.
if he writes one, apparently he wrote this to challenge himself. He prefers short story. He's a short story writer, and there was like some pressure for him to do this. That at least in the interviews that I've seen, 2 interviews with him, and then it's just like I might be reading between the lines, but it's almost a sense
short story writers to write novels.
Yeah, like he was responding to that pressure.
Yeah. This would I can see Alice Munro having a similar issue, because she put so much into her short stories. If she were to try to make them into novels, I think it would go on and on and on. I don't think her style of writing would translate well to novel form.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Next month, we're reading The Heirs by Susan Reiger. As you read the book, let us know your thoughts on Twitter with the hashtag LRH Book Club, or leave comments on our Facebook page or our website, literaryroadhouse.com. Our one desire in this life is to read your reviews on iTunes. So please tell us what you think of our show, or else we'll spend eternity as hunched over pale, baggy-eyed ghosts frantically refreshing our iTunes page. And lastly, did you miss us? We didn't die. We're just in a podcast sick box. To prevent future illness and delays, please consider sponsoring us at patreon.com/Roadhouse. Every little bit helps.
How did you see that with a straight face? That's kind of brilliant, guys. Kind of brilliant.
Move aside, George Saunders.
I'm going to be the person mimicking George Saunders. Yeah. That's going to be me. I'm going to start writing weird choruses. Okay, well, even though
that was so good.
Even though this show was cursed, I think we still got a good discussion out of it.
I think we did. Yeah, I think we did. Well done.
Yeah. Thank God. I was a little worried. I was a little worried, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It's over. It's like when I finished the book.
I heard that joke.
God.
Well, Gerald's already reading the next book.
Hey, this book was so bad it finally made me read The Road, and I'd had that on my to-be-read list since high school, and I was too scared to read it. And I was like, halfway through Bardo, I was like, man, if I read this much, I can read anything. And I picked up The Road, and it was amazing. And it actually helped me get through Bardo.
Good.
And I'd read like a chapter of Bardo.
It made me go back.
Like my spoon for sugar.
Yeah.
Right. I'm out of here.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Oh, you gotta take us off live.
Yep.